the end of a trial, and he's went down to the ground, and then he was shot twice in the back of the skull, and the bullets came out the front of his skull, according to the doctor's affidavit, which I have. And showed in the first version of my book. I showed in my film, and that was another assassination attempt. And police, the same police, basically police showed up immediately at the scene. The kind of supposed mugging happened in the lightest area. It happened at 11 p.m. at night in the brightest area of the world. It was Times Square, New York City. That's where that recording studio was. And so, of course, then the final murder was in Las Vegas with a supposed drive-by shooting. And of course, and so they shot Tupac, and right behind Tupac, where the bullets were coming from, was Suge Knight, and they didn't hit Suge Knight at all. Now, there was a recent arrest, though, was of a guy who said, well, I was in the car where the bullets came from. It was my nephew, Orlando Anderson, the guy that took the beating and was involved in the scuffle in the hotel lobby. He's the one that pulled the trigger. So this guy, Duane Davis, says this. He's arrested just within the past month or so, but he had said this about 8 or 10 years ago for a guy named Greg Kading, a police officer. Now, Russell Poole, who I told you was the original investigating police officer, he said Greg Kading was brought out about 10 years after his investigation to basically discredit his investigation, because when Russell Poole tried to come out with the fact that he found his fellow police officers were involved in Tupac Shakur's murder, they demoted him, and then they silenced him, and he had to resign from the police force to come out with his findings, which Nick Broomfield covered in his documentaries, and veteran reporter Nick Randall Sullivan covered in a book called Labyrinth. And so Russell Poole ends up saying that Greg Kading was a disgraced police officer, brought out, who was caught lying in court, forced to resign early, and they brought him out of retirement in order to just cover up his own findings. And that Greg Kading never talked to Russell Poole at all. And Greg Kading said it was this Duane Davis drove the car, was the mastermind of the murder of Tupac. His nephew actually pulled the trigger. And meanwhile, it was found out that Duane, Davis was given was supposed to go on trial and was supposed to receive a life in prison for drug dealing. But when he gave this confession of being behind Tupac's murder, he was completely let off the drug deal that could have landed him in prison for life. The drug dealing charge, and he was never prosecuted for the murder of Tupac either for years. We're talking about for about 8 or 10 years, and so. He obviously gave a confession just to get out of going to prison for drug dealing. And it was also found that this Greg Kading was caught lying when he said that some of the most corrupt police that were convicted of all kinds of corruption charges, they were actually working for Death Row Records. He said they were never working for Death Row Records, and his police chief said they were. They were certainly working for Death Row Records. So this is some of the evidence that is, this is a bogus arrest charge of who's the guy who's supposed to be involved in Tupac's murder, and that's where we're at.
All right. Well, there's obviously a very detailed answer there, John. So thank you for that. But if anyone's got any questions for John about the murder of Tupac, any wild conspiracy theories that you want clearing up, put them in the chat, and I will pick out the best ones. So, John, it seems that you lean in the camp of Tupac was considered maybe a threat to the status quo, or the state in general, because of his activism and his work, and it became necessary, to take that piece off the board, to put it bluntly. And I mean, it's certainly possible as well, but I suppose given his prominence, his wealth, his infamy, the fact that he was vocal about gangs and things like that, could that legitimately have just produced a kind of heat that would have made something like this inevitable anyway?
Yeah, no, I don't think it would have been inevitable for police to be involved in so many attacks on him just randomly, because there were so many attacks that were completely covered up. And so it takes, there was a undercover agent involved in setting up a sexual assault charge on Tupac also. This guy was found to have dozens and dozens of major charges all dismissed, which top lawyers said was a sure sign of a government intelligence agent. That's the only kind of person that can get major charges up and down the East Coast dismissed. And this is a guy named Haitian Jacques Ignan. And so Tupac, ended up realizing he was an undercover agent and said he was working for the feds in a song of his, a rap of his. And he said he set me up and wet me up because he thinks he was involved in setting up one of the shootings of him, and then setting up the sexual assault charge that he was eventually actually found not guilty of all major charges except touching a woman's butt against her will, who had admitted that she had consensual sex with him. And he got 1.5 to 4.5 years in jail for touching a woman's butt they had consensual sex. And so it's these bizarre kind of charges and other actions that show government involvement, much more than just random random heat. I have loads of details, over 1,000 endnotes in my books about from all the evidence, including government documents, court documents, some FBI documents, etc., that just show the evidence of everything I'm saying here.
Okay. In regards to Duane Davis, then, I mean, why has it taken so long to arrest this chap? I mean, have they arrested him solely on the strength of a confession, like you said earlier, or are there other bits of evidence that they finally pieced together to be able to charge him?
Yeah, well, I think it's. He said outright that he was involved. He was in the car that driving his nephew, who he says killed Tupac. Then he also said, though, in an interview, that his nephew went to the emergency room after the scuffle in the hotel room. The hotel lobby where it happened, and within 2 hours of supposedly going to the emergency room, he then is in a car, and he says, and he had his arm in a sling. His right arm was in a sling, he said, and so he's supposed to have a right arm in a sling, and then supposedly, is a perfect, shooter to kill Tupac in a drive-by shooting. And so it's just his statements are full of ridiculous, contradictions. They don't hold any weight because there's no physical evidence backing what he said. He said that Puffy, another major producer and rapper now called P. Diddy, I gave him $1 billion to carry out this hit, and that's another fantastical statement that's just supported by very little evidence, and most people don't believe that. And so no, I don't believe that P. Diddy had a hand in both Tupac and Biggie's deaths. I think P. Diddy wasn't political, and that was a big difference. But when P. Diddy started getting political a couple of years later by getting involved in a group called the Hip Hop Summit Action Network, P. Diddy got targeted himself. A government informant shot at P. Diddy for no reason. One of P. Diddy's rappers, Shine, on his label, shot back in self-defense. Shine went to prison for that. They tried to pin a gun possession charge on P. Diddy. When I was in living in New York City, the local news said that the government spent the most money ever on a gun possession charge to try to gain evidence on P. Diddy, and they couldn't find the evidence to support that he was just should be found guilty for gun possession. And so he didn't go to jail, but there was obvious warning to him to stop getting active in politics, get out of the Hip Hop Summit Action Network, because most of the rappers that got involved in Hip Hop Summit Action Network, some of which just weren't political before that, most of them were targeted in various ways. So this thing goes beyond just targeting Tupac.
Kazabez followed up with, there were 4 of them in the car. Do you happen to know if this is correct? And if so, who are we missing here?
Yeah, well, I argue that this whole theme, this whole idea that these gangbangers in the car pulled off the assassination of Tupac Shakur is all illegitimate. Russell Poole said it was professional hitmen. Likely, he says his fellow police officers were likely in the car. If not, then they had professional covert agents that did this for U.S. Basically, he said they were professional hitmen that did this. And he said gangbangers could not have pulled this off. It takes police radios. It takes all kinds of sophistication to
But
pull
what's so,
pull it off.
sorry to interrupt, John. I mean, what would be so complicated about pulling up alongside a car and spraying some bullets? Because I mean, from the sort of reports of the autopsy reports, things like that, I think he took a few bullets in the legs and things like that, and two in the chest. It seemed like it was a kind of very, sporadic popping off. I'm not a
But
gun expert, you might
there's
imagine.
yeah, well, Russell Poole was a high level, was a high level, police detective in Los Angeles who studied loads of these kinds of situations, and so I just take his word about the fact of the way it was needed to be pulled off. Biggie Smalls, FBI file even talked about this, and other police officers who were investigating also agreed that they believed it was a professional hit. But nonetheless, it's also the fact that the Las Vegas Police Department, according to award-winning Las Vegas police reporter Kathy Scott, she said that Las Vegas Police Department went against all of their normal procedures for investigating the situation, and they completely let off these people that killed Tupac. And so why did they do that? And why did they help cover it up? Russell Poole said he talked to the lead investigator in Las Vegas, and he joked that, well, we got a closet full of evidence, but no one's ever going to see it. And so he said they were covering it up, and he didn't know why. Russell Poole didn't know why. And Kathy Scott also said that an FBI agent was in Tupac's motorcade when he was killed, and was watching, was surveilling the situation. Why? So these are all loads of more evidence that this was a U.S. intelligence operation. It was not a random shooting, and not a random murder of Tupac. It was an assassination of a highly influential activist young man who was incredibly talented too, obviously.
I mean, maybe just take a moment to explain why he posed such a threat, because a lot of people won't be familiar with his activist background. A lot of people would have seen him as just a highly successful musician. Why would it become necessary? How would they benefit from removing Tupac from the playing field?
Again, so when he was getting gang members, like for example, the Latin Kings were like the biggest gang in New York City. They were a Latino gang, and they were influenced by the Young Lords, who were close with the Black Panthers. They were influenced by former Young Lords to follow in this movement, this gang peace truce movement, and turn on to activism. And they gave up all drug dealing. And when they were arrested en masse at one point around 1995 or I believe it was around 1996 or 7, there were no drugs found on them. Okay, and so when you take 3,000 members of a gang who were all mostly drug dealing, and you take all those drugs off the street, and this is just one gang of many throughout the country that were drug dealing, that money was being laundered in the banks. And the United Nations analysts have talked about this, that hundreds of billions of dollars have been found to be laundered in many major banks. HSBC, which in Britain, JP Morgan Chase, etc. They've admitted to it. Loads of money are laundered, and that laundered money, it's a huge cost when it's taken off the streets, when you're not laundering that money anymore. The CIA has been caught drug trafficking in a major way. 60 Minutes, our national program that has covered a lot of this. They've told about tankers being caught with a ton of cocaine, as in the 1990s. CIA has been drug trafficking for decades, and they were caught again in the 2000s, and this is the way things have happened. And so when you get all that drug dealing off the street, you really affect the money of these drug traffickers in the CIA, and the money that's made from laundering it in the banks and the corporations that are part of the stock market that also launder a lot of this drug money.
Well,
so billions of dollars being affected.
The psychedelic fish has asked, did the Las Vegas police not investigate because of government improvements to the public infrastructure in Las Vegas? That's another claim I'm not aware of.
No, the Las Vegas police didn't investigate because the way U.S. intelligence works is you got the highest levels of CIA, who are the head of the CIA is supervises all other 14 plus intelligence directors, and then you got one of those intelligence agencies under the CIA is the FBI, and then the FBI overlaps local police intelligence units. So Las Vegas would have had a police intelligence unit. Los Angeles has a much bigger police intelligence unit, as does New York City. And New York City and Los Angeles police intelligence units, it was found by the Miami Herald. First thing it was found in Labyrinth, in the book Labyrinth, that there was a New York City police officer investigating Biggie Smalls' murder who took pictures of Biggie when he died, who also was a member of the FBI. Okay, and this also came out in Biggie and Tupac. His name was Detective Oldham.
John, I'm afraid we've just run out of time. We managed to open a whole can of worms with a minute to go. So, I mean, maybe with the few seconds left, you could just let people know where